What's up, Internet, and welcome back. If you're new around here, I'm Tim Stedman, and this is Get Psyched with me, Tim Stedman. In today's review, we are going to be taking a look at all the fun terms, theories, and concepts you will find in the second unit of AP Psychology, Cognition. So how about we pop those thinking caps on, take those review guides out, and get started with the learning. Yep, that was a live barn clip of me ripping the GWG top shelf in OT, baby. Brought home a crucial W for the Hockey Donkeys on that weekday night at 10:45 p.m. I was a hero. Good times. Now, what exactly does this have to do with our Unit 2 review on cognition? Well, to be honest, I'm not quite sure yet. I just wanted to show everyone that sweet goal of mine. But if you do remember the beginning of my Unit 1 review video, I do recall saying something along the lines of, one of the things I love about teaching psychology is that I can take any random thought that pops into my head and easily relate it to whatever I'm talking about in class that day. And I stand by those words. Not even kidding. Test me. Think really hard of something that you think doesn't relate to psychology, drop a comment, and I will gladly have a kind, heated internet debate with you. It's how I spend most of my free time anyways, so why not?
My deodorant claims it lasts 72 hours. It absolutely does not. Why is this? It works. You are just stinky. And send. Well, should probably teach.
In Unit 2, we're talking all about cognition. Cognition is the process behind how we think, learn, remember, and use information. In this review, we're going to cover all of the mental activities that our brains perform on a daily basis. We're going to focus on how the cognitive processes such as perception, memory, problem-solving, and decision-making allow us to function in a modern society. And the cool thing about this unit, the concepts and theories we learn will not only make you smarter, but it will also provide you with strategies and techniques to help you pass the AP Psych test. All right, so I'm assuming by now you've either just skipped ahead to the actual content you need to learn, or you're just thinking to yourself, hey, Mr. Stedman, I don't care about anything you've talked about for the last minute or so. Can you please just get started with the actual learning now? All right, fine. So here we go, I guess. In our Unit 1 review on the biological basis, we ended with a riveting conversation on the human senses. And for our Unit 2 review, we're going to pick up where we left off, where we will find out what happens to all of this sensory information when it reaches the brain, which is something that we're going to call perception. The process of sensation and perception are very closely related, so if that's the case, why exactly are they separated by units? Well, this is because sensation is a biological process where our sensory organs detect stimuli, while perception is more of a cognitive process involving the interpretation and organization of those sensory signals by our brain. Because of this, it is technically correct to talk about sensation during the biology unit and perception during the cognition unit. Two key processes of perception are going to be bottom-up and top-down processing. And we're going to see that both of these processes work together to help us perceive and make sense of the world. Bottom-up processing is when we build up to a perception from individual pieces of sensory information. This process starts with the stimulus itself, where our sensory receptors collect data and send it to the brain for analysis. For example, imagine a bug flying around you. Your eyes detect the movement, color, and shape of the bug. Your ears will hear the buzzing, and you may even feel it land on your face. Your brain takes all of this basic sensory information, puts it all together, and allows you to perceive a bug. Top-down processing is using our pre-existing knowledge, experience, and expectations to interpret sensory information. Take a look at the sentence on the screen. The first thing you probably are going to notice are the missing letters. Chances are you are still able to comprehend the sentence because of the context of the letters and your familiarity with the English language. It's going to be top-down processing that allows you to read "the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog," even though some of the letters are missing. So how about we take a look at how these two processes work together in order to form meaningful perceptions. Take a look at the image on the screen. What do you see? a duck, or a rabbit. With bottom-up processing, you focus on the specific features of the image, like the shape of the ears or beak, in order to determine what you're looking at. While with top-down processing, your brain uses contextual clues and past experiences to decide what the animal is. So like, if your parents are prized rabbit breeders or something cool like that, you would probably see a rabbit first due to your past experience of being exposed to rabbits more than ducks. Outside of bottom-up and top-down processing, there are a few other processes that influence our perception that we also need to know about. Schemas are going to be mental frameworks that help us organize and interpret information based on our past experiences and knowledge. Schemas are going to act like shortcuts in our thinking, helping our brain process a boatload of information quickly and efficiently. When you see the rabbit-duck picture, your schema for a rabbit or duck might influence which image you saw first. If you have more experience with ducks, I don't know, maybe you live near a pond or something, then you will probably be more likely to perceive the image as a duck. Perceptual sets refer to our tendency to perceive certain aspects of sensory data while ignoring others. This is influenced by our expectations, emotions, and prior knowledge. In the case of our rabbit or duck image, if someone tells you beforehand that they're going to show you a picture of a rabbit, this will actually prime your brain to see the rabbit first and even make it more difficult for you to even see a duck at all. Context effects demonstrate how the context in which a stimulus is perceived can influence our perception of it. The surrounding environment and situational factors can affect how we interpret sensory information. For example, if the rabbit-duck picture is presented around Easter, you might be more likely to see a rabbit because of the contextual association with Easter bunnies. Selective attention is our brain's ability to focus on a specific stimulus while ignoring others. This allows us to concentrate on what's important while filtering out the background noises. While you're watching this video, your brain is hard at work tuning out the other sounds in your environment, allowing you to focus on all the important things that I'm saying. The cocktail party effect is going to be a great example of selective attention in action. Imagine you're at a noisy party, yet you can still focus on a single conversation despite the surrounding noise. This effect shows our ability to zero in on what's relevant to us while ignoring what's irrelevant. Change blindness is when we fail to notice changes in our environment. This can happen when our attention is focused elsewhere. And hey, while we're on the topic of change blindness, notice anything different? So, throughout the video, I've been pulling the old switcheroo on ya, switched up the shirt I was wearing, started rocking this dope hookah shell necklace that made me feel like an absolute stud in my high school years.
I'm sorry that I loved you. I'm sorry that I cared.
And I also shaved that sad excuse for a beard off my face. For a quick second, I was actually going stash only, and I felt pretty cool about that. So, were you able to pick up on any of these changes as they happened? Well, if you did, you probably shouldn't feel special because that just means that you weren't paying enough attention to the content. And that means if you didn't notice, you were paying a lot of attention to what's important? This guy. And if you're a fan of this guy right here, and I mean like, come on, it wouldn't be. How about you do both of us a solid and subscribe to the channel? It will let you know when new AP Psych videos drop, all the while making me feel cool about myself. A classic win-win. So with that out of the way, how about we take a look at another important aspect of perception, Gestalt psychology. So Gestalt psychology states that we perceive objects as a whole rather than a collection of parts. It suggests that our brains are wired to see patterns and shapes in the world around us, organizing sensory information into meaningful wholes. Gestalt psychology has several key principles that help explain how we come to a meaningful perception. The figure-ground relationship is our ability to distinguish an object from its surrounding environment. This principle helps us focus on what's important in a scene and separate it from the background. For example, when you look at a picture of a vase, your brain can either focus on the vase itself as the figure or the space around it as the ground, depending on your perspective. Next up is closure. Closure is our brain's way of filling in the gaps to create a complete whole object, even when parts of it are missing. This principle is why we can recognize incomplete figures or shapes. For instance, when you see a circle with a small segment missing, your brain still perceives it as a whole circle. Proximity is another principle. It states that the objects that are close to each other tend to be grouped together. Our brains naturally associate items that are near one another as part of the same group. For example, if you see a cluster of dots close together, you're likely to perceive them as a single group rather than individual unrelated dots. Lastly, we have similarity, which suggests that objects that look alike are more likely to be grouped together by our brains. This principle helps us organize visual information by grouping similar elements such as shapes, colors, or sizes. For example, if you see a pattern of circles and squares, your brain will group the circles together and the squares together based on their similarity. Gestalt psychology is very important when it comes to our perception. By understanding these principles, we gain insights into how our brains organize and interpret the complex world around us, allowing us to make sense of visual information quickly and efficiently. Now for the next step of our perception journey, it's going to require a nice change of scenery, so how about I'll meet you there? Oh, hey, you made it. Nice. So for this next part of our perception journey, we're going to take a look at how we are able to detect motion, as well as see the world in the third dimension. Monocular cues are pieces of visual information that can be perceived with just one eye alone. Relative clarity states that we perceive objects with more detail as close up, while objects with less detail as further away. So how about you take a look at our scene? Notice how the trees and road in the foreground are much clearer and much more detailed, while those in the background are hazier, showing us a bit of depth. So that's relative clarity for you. Next, we have relative size. So when we assume that two objects are similar in size, the one that projects a smaller image on our retina, we perceive as further away. So how about you take a look at the two handsome gentlemen standing behind me? Because of relative size, we know that the guy appearing smaller is standing farther back and not just some tiny flying man. Texture gradient lets us know that when we see a lot of detail and texture, it's probably closer to us, while finer and less distinct textures are perceived as being further away. Take a look at the road. Notice how up close you can see more detail, such as debris on the road. As you travel into the distance, the road seems to smooth out. Linear perspective tells us that parallel lines appear to meet up as they go further into the distance. In our picture, this is shown with our road. Notice how in the foreground, the white lines appear to be much further away, and as we go into the distance, they appear to meet up. And last, interposition is going to happen when one object overlaps another. Well, the object that's being overlapped is perceived as further away. In our scene, this can easily be explained by taking a look at the trees. Trees in the foreground partially overlap those in the background, so we perceive those foreground trees as closer. All right, and that's it for monocular cues. Back to the HQ. All right, cool. So now that we've covered monocular cues, let's move on to binocular cues, which are going to require both of our eyes in order to perceive depth. These cues are going to be especially important for judging the distance of nearby objects. Convergence is the inward movement of our eyes when we focus on objects that are close to us. The more our eyes converge, the closer the object appears. So how about we test it out? Try focusing on your finger, just like this. Now, as you bring it closer to your nose, you will feel your eyes crossing as they converge to maintain focus. If you want another example of convergence, at your own risk, of course, feel free to open up Google and type in the words finger sausage. Again, at your own risk. Next up, retinal disparity is going to rely on the fact that our eyes are about 2 inches apart, which means each eye receives a slightly different retinal image. Now, luckily for us, the brain is able to merge these two images together to create a single three-dimensional image. Now, the greater the disparity between the images from each eye, the closer the object appears. So to test this out, we have another finger test. All you have to do is hold a finger in front of your face and close one eye at a time, just like this. Now, you'll notice when you're doing this that your finger seems to jump back and forth, and this is just going to be due to the different perspectives of each eye. These binocular cues are crucial for depth perception, especially when dealing with objects that are close to us. They help us navigate our environment and perform tasks that require a solid judgment of depth, like catching a ball or writing notes. Next up, we're going to talk about perceptual constancies, which help us understand that objects maintain their shape and size even if our retinal image tells us otherwise. Size constancy allows us to understand that when an object is appearing to change size in our retinal image, that the object isn't physically changing size, just getting closer to us or further away from us. Shape constancy allows us to recognize that objects keep the same shape no matter what angle you are looking at it. Just think about what happens when you open a rectangular door. As you begin to open it, the shape of the door that our eyes see changes from rectangular to more of a trapezoid. Our brain's understanding of shape constancy allows us to understand the door isn't changing, just our perspective of it is. And for our last topic on perception, we have a really cool one, apparent movement. This is going to occur when we perceive motion in an object that isn't actually moving. So on the screen, you will see a circle of, well, circles. So watch what happens when we flash these circles on and off very quickly. Does it kind of look like they're spinning? This illusion happens because our brains interpret the rapid changes in position as continuous motion, even though the objects themselves aren't moving at all. It's actually a pretty solid demonstration of how our brains can be tricked by various visual cues in our environment. All right, so now moving on to our next topic for Unit 2, which is going to be taking a look at thinking, problem solving, judgments, and decision making. So let's start by taking a look at how our thoughts are structured, starting with the idea of concepts. Concepts are going to form the basis of our thoughts, allowing us to categorize and make sense of the world around us. They are the mental groupings of similar objects, events, ideas, or people. Within these concepts, we have prototypes, which are the ideal or most typical examples of a given concept. For example, your concept of dog will include all of the different breeds you know about, but the prototype of a dog will be the first thing that comes to mind when you think of dogs. It is important to know that prototypes are not always the same for everyone. I've had a pet corgi for most of my life, so corgis are my prototype for dogs. Yours might be a lab, a golden retriever, or any other common dog breed. Schemas are going to be the mental structures that help us organize and interpret information. These schemas are kind of like the brain's filing cabinet, interpreting information from our environment through the process of assimilation and accommodation. Assimilation is when we incorporate new information into our existing schema. For example, if you have a schema for dogs and you meet a new breed of dog, your brain will place this new information into your existing concept of what a dog is. Accommodation is when we adjust our schemas to fit new information. So let's say you run into an animal that doesn't quite fit your dog schema, like a cat, for instance. Well, if this happens, you might modify your schema of animals to differentiate between dogs and cats. All right, so that's how we think and organize information. Now let's shift our focus to another critical aspect of cognition: problem solving and decision making strategies. So we're going to get started with problem solving methods first. One common problem solving method is going to be the use of algorithms. Algorithms are step-by-step procedures that will guarantee a solution to a problem. They are systematic and logical, but they can be very time consuming. It's important to know that while algorithms do include all of those math class formulas, they also include things like following directions to a recipe or how to assemble a piece of IKEA furniture. Heuristics are going to be the mental shortcuts or rule of thumb strategies that make our problem solving and decision making easier by reducing the number of possible options we have to consider. These strategies can speed up the processes of finding a solution, but they also make us a bit more prone to errors. This would be something like choosing the line with the fewest people while checking out at the store, or looking through the textbook glossary to define a vocab term. And while heuristics are great for problem solving, they also do play a very significant role in decision-making by helping us make quick judgments and decisions without having to overanalyze every piece of information. The representative heuristic involves judging the likelihood of an event based on how similar it is to a prototype we have in our mind. For example, if you meet someone who is very quiet and enjoys reading, you might use the representative heuristic to assume they are more likely to be a librarian than a salesperson, even though statistically there are far more salespeople than librarians. On the other hand, the availability heuristic relies on immediate examples that come to mind. When you are trying to decide how dangerous something is, you might think of recent news stories or personal experiences. For instance, if you have recently heard about a plane crash, you might overestimate the danger of flying because that information is fresh in your memory.
All right, so if you haven't already, you're probably going to start realizing a reoccurring themes in these videos: me messing up. Well, that's what happened here. Forgot to talk about what influences our decision making, so here we are. So in addition to these heuristics, our decision making is influenced by some other factors as well. A mental set is going to be when we keep approaching problems using familiar strategies that worked in the past, even if they don't fit the current situation, which can create kind of a fixation, which really limits our problem-solving abilities. Framing is all about how information is presented. It can significantly shape our decisions and judgments. For example, people are much more likely to choose a treatment described as having a 90% survival rate rather than one with a 10% mortality rate, even though both of these mean the same thing. This shows us how the context or wording of information can steer our choices. Priming happens when exposure to one thing subconsciously influences how we respond to something else. Like after hearing the word doctor, we're going to be faster at recognizing related words like nurse or hospital. This happens because our brain has already activated those associated concepts. And on top of these influences, we're also going to have some obstacles in the decision-making process. which I did remember to talk about in the original video, so I'll see you back there.
The gambler's fallacy is the belief that if something happens more frequently than normal during a given period, it will happen less frequently in the future. This is often seen in, well, gambling, where someone might believe that after flipping a coin and getting heads several times in a row, tails is due to come up next. However, each flip of the coin is independent, and the probability remains the same each time. On the other hand, we've got the sunk cost fallacy, which is going to involve continuing a behavior or endeavor because of previously invested resources, even if the activity no longer has benefits. Kind of like me with this YouTube channel. Jokes, of course. I love it here on the tube, talking to all of you lovely, lovely viewers. Now, both of these fallacies highlight how our decision-making can be flawed and influenced by irrational beliefs and past investments. Being aware of these biases can help us make more rational and effective decisions in the future. And for our next cognitive principle, we have the executive function. Our executive function includes the mental skills that help us manage our thoughts, actions, and emotions, helping us achieve goals. It's kind of like the control center of our cognition, helping us stay organized, focused, and flexible with our thinking. One key component of the executive function is our working memory. This is our ability to hold and manipulate information in our mind over short periods of time. When you're solving a math problem in your head, you're putting that working memory to use. Cognitive flexibility allows us to switch between different tasks or thoughts and to adapt to new situations. This skill is essential for problem solving and adapting to changing environments. And last, we have inhibitory control, which is our ability to suppress impulsive responses and resist distractions. This skill helps us stay focused on tasks and avoid making hasty decisions. So these components of executive function are crucial for effective problem solving, decision making, and overall cognitive performance. By understanding and improving our executive function skills, we can enhance our ability to manage complex tasks and navigate daily challenges much more effectively. And to finish our conversation on thinking, we have two important types of thinking to talk about: divergent thinking and convergent thinking. Divergent thinking is all about creativity and exploring multiple possible solutions. When you're engaging in divergent thinking, you're brainstorming, imagining new possibilities, and thinking outside of the box. This type of thinking is crucial for innovation and creativity. If I were to ask you to brainstorm how many different ways you could use a paperclip, you'd be using divergent thinking to help complete the task. On the other hand, convergent thinking involves narrowing down multiple ideas into a single best solution. It's more about logical reasoning and finding the most effective answer to a problem. Convergent thinking is essential for tasks that require a clear and correct solution, like solving a math problem or answering a multiple choice question. While both types of thinking are valuable, divergent thinking is particularly important for creativity, since it allows us to break free from conventional thinking patterns and come up with creative ideas and approaches. Now, even with this cool brain ability of ours, there are still going to be some things out there that can mess with our creative thinking. Functional fixedness is the tendency to see objects and their functions in a fixed way, which can limit our ability to use them creatively. Now, if you only think of a paperclip as something that holds papers together, you might miss out on using it for other purposes, like picking a lock or making a small hook. This mental block can prevent us from seeing all the potential uses and solutions right in front of us. All right, and that wraps up our topic on thinking, problem solving, and decision making. Now it's time to move on to a very, very important aspect of cognition. And I know I've been saying that for just about everything, but who cares? It's time to talk about our memory. Memory is the process by which we encode, store, and retrieve information. It allows us to retain past experiences, learn new information, and use that information to guide our future actions. We're going to have different categories of memory, each serving a unique purpose. First up, we have explicit memory. This type of memory involves the conscious recall of facts and events. Explicit memory includes both our episodic and semantic memories. Episodic memory refers to our ability to remember specific events or episodes from our lives, like your last birthday or your first day of school. While semantic memories involve our knowledge of facts, concepts, and general information, like knowing that Paris is the capital of France or understanding the rules to a board game. Next, we're going to have our implicit memories, and these memories are going to be ones that we are not consciously aware of. So these are going to be some things that we can do without any conscious effort, like riding a bike, texting a friend, or even tying our shoes. A key component of implicit memory is our procedural memory, which helps us with performing various tasks or actions. requiring little to no conscious effort. Procedural memory is what allows me to skate all around the ice rink while being able to pay attention to where the puck is, allowing me to rip a mean slap shot top shelf, giving the hockey donkeys the OT dub. Like I said, I can relate just about anything to psychology. It's the beauty of teaching the class. And then we have something called prospective memory, which is our ability to remember to do something in the future, like taking vitamins or remembering to say happy birthday to your friend on that special day of theirs. Understanding these different types of memory helps us appreciate how our brain organizes and retrieves information. Which brings us to a good point. What exactly is the brain's role in all of this? Well, we're going to have something called long-term potentiation, or LTP, which is just a process where synaptic connections between neurons become stronger with frequent activation. When we repeatedly stimulate a synaptic connection, it becomes more efficient at transmitting signals. This increased efficiency is believed to be fundamental for learning and memory formation. Now, earlier we talked about working memory. Now we're going to talk about it a little more. And this time we're going to get a little more specific with it. Psychologist Alan Baddeley's working memory model contains three main components: the central executive, the phonological loop, and the visuospatial sketchpad. The central executive acts like the manager, directing attention and coordinating activities of the phonological loop and visuospatial sketchpad. It's going to decide what information to keep and what information to discard, ensuring that our cognitive processes run smoothly. The phonological loop deals with auditory information. It helps us remember and process spoken and written material, like when you're repeating a phone number to yourself to remember it. The visuospatial sketchpad handles visual and spatial information. It allows us to visualize and manipulate objects in our mind, kind of like when you're trying to remember directions or visualize a math problem. These components work together to help us process and make use of information in the real time, making working memory a critical aspect of our cognitive functioning. The multi-store model of memory is going to show us how information flows through the different stages of memory. Information from the environment first enters sensory memory, where it is briefly held for just a few seconds. Now, sensory memory has a very large capacity for information, and it acts as a buffer for stimuli received through our senses. The two major sensory registries are going to be our iconic and echoic memory. Iconic memory is our sensory memory for visual information. It's going to last for about half a second and allows us to retain an image of what we just saw for a very brief moment. Echoic memory, on the other hand, is our sensory memory for auditory information. It lasts a bit longer, around 2 to 4 seconds, and helps us retain any sound that reaches our temporal lobe. So imagine seeing a sparkler being waved around in the dark. The trail of light you briefly see is our sensory memory at work, allowing us to have a continuous experience of the world by holding on to sensory information long enough for further processing. If we give enough attention to this information, it goes from sensory to short-term memory. Short-term memory is where we hold and manipulate information for a short amount of time. It is what we are currently thinking about at any given moment. Short-term memory generally holds anywhere from 5 to 9 units of information, and unless we rehearse this information, it will only last for about 20 to 30 seconds. Through the process of encoding, information can be transferred from short-term memory to long-term memory. Long-term memory is where we store information, allowing us to retain knowledge and experiences over time. Now, theoretically speaking, our long-term memory has unlimited storage and can potentially last forever. Encoding is the process of converting sensory input into a format that can be stored in our brain. It involves taking information from our environment and transforming it into neural messages that our brain can understand. Storage is going to refer to the maintenance of this encoded information over time. It's like saving a file on your computer. When you click save and exit out of the file, it gets stored in your computer hard drive until you open the file again. Well, our memory works in a very similar way. Retrieval is the process of accessing and bringing stored information back into consciousness. This allows us to recall memories and use them in our daily activities, like remembering a friend's name or solving a science problem. All right, so we've talked about how memory works, including the basics on how information is encoded, stored, and retrieved. Well, now we're going to take more of an in-depth look at some of these important memory processes, starting with encoding. Automatic processing is going to occur without any conscious effort. It's going to be like our muscle memory, where we learn something enough for it to become second nature, such as driving a familiar route or recognizing faces. Effortful processing, on the other hand, requires attention and conscious effort. This is how we learn new information that isn't automatically ingrained. like studying for an exam or learning a new language. Memory is going to be encoded in 3 levels from shallowest to deepest. Shallow processing focuses on physical features of information, while deeper processing involves understanding and relating to the meaning of the information. Structural encoding is the most basic form of encoding, focusing on what the information looks like. It's like recognizing the font or the shape of the letters in a word without necessarily understanding what they mean. While important for remembering basic things such as the format of a word or identifying a visual pattern, this form of processing is not as effective for deeper understanding and long-term retention of information. The next level is phonemic encoding, which involves processing how the information sounds. This level is a little deeper than structural encoding because it requires auditory recognition, such as rhyming words or listening to the pronunciation of a word, tasks that require a bit more mental energy. And finally, for our deepest level of encoding, we have semantic encoding. This is going to involve understanding the meaning of the information and relating it to other pre-established concepts. Semantic encoding is the most effective form of encoding for long-term memory retention because it creates strong associations and connections with our cognitive framework. How we encode information will determine how effectively this information is stored, which makes it much easier for us to retrieve. Mnemonic devices do a great job at improving our encoding. I'm sure you've heard of them and used them in the past. They're just going to be basic strategies designed to aid memory retention by creating associations between pieces of information, and they're going to do a great job at improving our encoding. One effective mnemonic device, and one of my personal favorites, is going to be the method of loci. The method of loci involves associating information with specific physical locations in a familiar environment, like our home or maybe even our drive to school. By mentally placing items to remember in these locations, we can enhance our ability to recall the information later on. Now, unfortunately, in order to keep this video reasonably short, I can't go into too much more detail about how the method of loci works, but if you are interested, in the description box, you can find a link to a video where I walk you through the entire method of loci process, and I'll even give you a nice little tour through a memory palace of my very own. These mnemonics work because associating new information with pre-established memories allows for easier retrieval. This is because the brain creates connections between new and existing knowledge, making the new information more accessible and easier to recall. And if you're not a fan of mnemonics, well, lucky for you, there are a few other ways that we improve our encoding. Chunking, other than sounding pretty gross, involves grouping individual pieces of information into larger, more manageable units, making them easier to remember. Think of how we remember phone numbers. Instead of trying to remember 10 individual numbers, we chunk them down into smaller groups, allowing us to recall the number as a series of chunks rather than individual digits. Categorizing information helps by organizing the information into related groups, which can help with enhancing our recall by connecting new information to existing knowledge. Hierarchies, another good method, are going to be when we create some form of structured framework where the information we need to remember is organized from general to specific, allowing for a deeper understanding of information, leading to better memory retention. The timing of encoding can also play a role in memory retention. The spacing effect states that spreading out learning over time is much better for memory retention than cramming it all at once. Who would have guessed? Massed practice, or cramming, involves studying intensely over a short period of time. While it might seem efficient, it often leads to quick forgetting. Distributed practice spreads learning sessions over a longer period of time. This method is going to lead to better retention and understanding of the material because it allows for better encoding and consolidation of information. So research has consistently showed that distributed practice is much more effective than mass practice for long-term retention of memories. By spacing out your studying, you give your brain time to process and integrate new information, making it easier to recall later on. The order of how information is presented can also influence the encoding process. The serial position effect states that we are much more likely to remember items at the beginning and end of a list better than those in the middle. This is going to be caused by the primacy and recency effect, which means people tend to remember the first and last items in a sequence better because the first items are more deeply encoded into long-term memory, while the last items are still fresh in our short-term memory. All right, so that does it for how we encode information. Now let's take a look at how this information is actually stored in the brain. Our ability to store information can be improved through different rehearsal techniques. Maintenance rehearsal involves repeating information over and over to keep it in our short-term memory. Now, we've all been there before, repeating a phone number to ourselves over and over again until we finally dial it, or asking our friend to remember the first 4 digits or whatever. Never a fun time. But hey, how about we try using elaborative rehearsal in the future, which is going to involve linking new information to existing knowledge, which is going to help with creating deeper associations. So using mnemonic devices such as the method of Loci is a great example of using elaborative rehearsal. This form of rehearsal is generally much more effective for long-term memory because it creates stronger, more meaningful associations, which will help with improving our autobiographical memory. And guess what? For some lucky people, and we're talking less than 100 worldwide, they don't even have to worry about rehearsing information because of their highly superior autobiographical memory. So HSAM is the ability to recall a ton of personal experiences and events with incredible detail and accuracy. If I asked you what you had for breakfast on March 12, 2017, it'd probably be pretty tough for you to remember. But for someone with HSAM, there is a high possibility they could recall this information without even breaking a sweat. Now let's talk about some of the challenges that can negatively affect our storage processes, specifically various forms of amnesia. Typically caused by damage to the brain, amnesia is a condition characterized by the loss of memories such as facts, information, and experiences. Anterograde amnesia is the inability to form new memories after the brain injury occurred. People with this type of amnesia can recall past memories, but struggle to remember new pieces of information. Retrograde amnesia, on the other hand, is the loss of memories we have already established. People with retrograde amnesia may not remember events that happened before the onset of amnesia, but they can still form new memories. And not your typical case of amnesia, as in it's more of a phenomenon that occurs to us all rather than the result of brain damage. Infantile amnesia is going to refer to the inability of adults to recall memories from early childhood, typically before the ages of 3 or 4. This occurs because the brain structures involved in memory storage, such as the hippocampus, are not fully developed in early childhood, making it difficult for long-term memories to be formed and retained during that period. One of the more severe issues with our memory is Alzheimer's disease, which is a progressive neurological disorder that can lead to the degeneration and death of our brain cells, resulting in memory loss, cognitive decline, and even personality changes. Symptoms often include confusion, difficulty with language and communication, disorientation, and impaired judgment. The exact cause of Alzheimer's is not fully understood, but we do know that it involves a combination of genetic, environmental, and lifestyle factors that can lead to abnormal protein deposits in the brain that lead to the death of brain cells. All right, so moving on to our next topic, we are going to be taking a look at the process of how we retrieve the memories that we have stored. Recall is our ability to retrieve information from our memory without any type of environmental cue. It's like answering an open-ended question on a test where you have to remember the information without any prompts. On the other hand, recognition involves identifying information after encountering it again, often with the help of retrieval cues. It's like answering a multiple-choice question where the answer is provided among other options. A retrieval cue is just going to be a stimulus that can help you access a certain memory. For example, seeing a familiar face might help you remember the person's name, where smelling a particular smell might remind you of a specific event from your past. Next up, we have the encoding specificity principle, which states that memory retrieval is most effective when the conditions during encoding are similar to those during retrieval. One aspect of this principle is context-dependent memory, which is going to explain how we are more likely to recall information if we are in the same environment where it was originally encoded. You might find it easier to remember your psychology notes when you're sitting in the same classroom where you originally learned them. Then we've got mood congruent memory, where our current mood can trigger memories that are consistent with that mood. So if you're feeling happy, you're probably going to recall more happy memories, while if you're feeling sad, more sad memories. Next up, state-dependent memory is when you are more likely to remember information if you are in the same physical or mental state while the information is being encoded. For example, if you learn something while caffeinated, retrieval of that memory would be improved if you were caffeinated while attempting to retrieve it. All right, cool. So how about now we talk about some of the retrieval practices out there that can help us improve our memory recall. The testing effect happens when taking a test on material improves long-term retention of that material more effectively than simply studying it. When you take a test, you're not only showing what you learn, but you're also strengthening the encoding of that information while being tested. This is because the process of retrieval reinforces memory traces and helps consolidate the information into our long-term memory. So, next time you're studying, it might be a good idea to take some practice tests. Another key retrieval practice is metacognition, which is our ability to think about and understand our own learning processes. By being aware of how you study and what strategies work best for you, you can improve your learning efficiency. These practices emphasize the importance of active engagement and self-reflection in the learning process in order for us to be more successful academically. Now, next up, something we probably already know about our memories, the fact that the process is not always perfect, and sometimes we end up forgetting some pretty important things. And we're going to find out that there are several psychological reasons for this. For starters, time plays a big role in our forgetting. Hermann Ebbinghaus's forgetting curve states that our ability to retain information decreases rapidly over time, with the most significant loss occurring shortly after we learn the material. This means that without active review or practice, we tend to forget a large portion of what we initially learn. Yep, who would have guessed it? Studying is important. Another common reason for forgetting is encoding failure, which occurs when information is never properly stored in long-term memory in the first place. If we don't pay enough attention to information, it won't be effectively encoded. It's why you might forget someone's name right after meeting them, something I do all the time, and as a teacher, probably not a good flaw to have. Interference theory suggests that our ability to retrieve information can be disrupted by other memories. This includes proactive interference, where older memories mess with the recall of new information, and retroactive interference, where new information disrupts the recall of old memories. Another common retrieval issue is the tip-of-the-tongue phenomenon, where we are temporarily unable to retrieve a word or piece of information that we know we have stored in our memory. It often feels like the information is just out of reach. Another explanation for memory loss comes from the psychodynamic perspective, which introduces the theory of repression. According to this theory, the brain unconsciously blocks out distressing or traumatic memories in order to protect the individual from emotional pain. The father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud, believed that repressed memories can still influence behavior and emotions even if the person is not consciously aware of them. Understanding repression can provide insights into how our minds cope with and manage traumatic experiences. And to wrap up our discussion on memory, have you ever had an extremely vivid memory of something only to find out later on it never happened, or maybe some of the details were way off? Well, if you have, no worries. This is actually pretty normal, and it happens because our memories are not necessarily perfect recreation of our lives. A false memory is going to be a recollection of an event that did not happen or that happened differently from the way we remember it. One reason this can happen is because of something known as the misinformation effect, which states that our memories can be altered when we are exposed to misleading information after witnessing the event. This often leads to the incorporation of incorrect details into our memory of the event. Another factor is source amnesia, where we remember the information but cannot recall where or how we obtained it, making it easy to mix real memories with misinformation. Now, have you ever had an argument with a friend or sibling about the details of an event you were both at, where you could have sworn a certain person was with you at a particular event only to find out they weren't? Well, if you answered yes to any of the above questions, then you've fallen victim to the misinformation effect and source confusion. But, as we know now, unless we have a highly superior autobiographical memory, chances are we've all experienced this type of memory distortion before. Now, memory distortion often occurs because we have what is known as constructive memories, which just means that we build our memories based on our perceptions, thoughts, and experiences. Having a constructive memory means that our memories are not always perfect replicas of events, but are influenced by our existing knowledge and beliefs. When we recall an event, our brain reconstructs it, filling in the gaps with plausible details. Memory consolidation is going to be the process where our short-term memories are transformed into more stable long-term memories. During this process, memories can be altered as they are stabilized and integrated with existing knowledge. Imagination inflation occurs when simply imagining an event can increase our confidence that the event actually happened, even if it never did. This is because the act of imagination can create vivid details that our brain may later confuse with real memories, which can greatly influence the consolidation process. These processes show how our memories are not static and can be reshaped over time, leading to inaccuracies and distortions. All right, so now that we've covered the various aspects of memories, let's move on to our final topic for Unit 2, something I've got a whole lot of: intelligence and achievement. In psychology, intelligence refers to the mental capacity to learn from experience, adapt to new situations, understand complex ideas, and use knowledge to manipulate our environment. It's a rather broad concept that is going to include several cognitive abilities. So over the years, there have been a whole lot of debate on what it actually means to be intelligent. One of the earliest theories was proposed by Charles Spearman, who introduced the idea of a general intelligence factor, or what he called the G factor. Spearman believed that a single underlying factor determines intelligence. This means that if someone is good at one type of mental task, they're probably going to be good at another type of mental task. On the other hand, Robert Sternberg proposed the triarchic theory of intelligence, which suggests that intelligence is much more complex than a single general factor. Sternberg's theory divides intelligence into three components: analytical intelligence, which involves problem solving and logical reasoning; creative intelligence, which involves the ability to deal with new and unusual situations by using past experiences and current skills; and practical intelligence, which is going to involve the ability to adapt to everyday life by drawing on existing knowledge and skills. To understand intelligence, psychologists have developed various methods to measure it, with one of the most well-known being the intelligence quotient, or IQ. IQ is just a score designed to measure human intelligence. IQ is a term coined by American psychologist Louis Terman in the early 20th century. Terman's intelligence test built upon French psychologist Alfred Binet's work, who introduced the idea of mental age in order to identify students needing educational assistance. Terman used mental age compared to actual age to calculate IQ with the formula IQ equals mental age over chronological age times 100. So if a 10-year-old child had a mental age of 12, their IQ would be as calculated: 12 divided by 10 times 100, which would equal an IQ of 120. And while this method of measuring intelligence was groundbreaking, it did face some criticism due to its limitations, which led to the development of more comprehensive theories and tests that measure intelligence beyond just a single score. When it comes to an intelligence test, a good test is going to be standardized, valid, and reliable. When a test is standardized, it means that the test is administered and scored the same way across different test takers. This ensures that everyone takes the test under the same conditions, which decreases bias and allows for a fair comparison of scores. Validity refers to how well a test measures what it's supposed to measure. A valid intelligence test accurately assesses the various aspects of intelligence it claims to measure, such as logical reasoning, problem solving, and verbal skills. Now, there are going to be two types of validity that we need to know about. Starting with construct validity, this is going to ensure the test truly measures the concept of intelligence, while predictive validity indicates how well the test predicts future performance or outcomes. Reliability means that the test yields consistent results over time. If you take the test multiple times under similar conditions, you should receive similar scores, indicating that the test is dependable and stable. Test-retest reliability measures consistency over time by comparing scores from the same test taken at different times. And split-half reliability assesses the consistency of results across different parts of the test. And in addition to being standardized, valid, and reliable, intelligence tests should also be socio-culturally responsive to ensure fairness across diverse populations. This means designing assessments that are sensitive to cultural differences and do not disadvantage any group. One important factor to consider is the stereotype threat, which happens when individuals feel at risk of confirming negative stereotypes about their social group. This anxiety can negatively affect their performance on tests. If a student is aware of a stereotype that their ethnic group does poorly on intelligence tests, this awareness can negatively impair their performance on that test. And opposite of stereotype threat, we have stereotype lift, which occurs when individuals perform better because they are aware of positive stereotypes about their group. Ensuring that assessments are socioculturally responsive helps weaken the effects of stereotype threat, promoting a more accurate and equitable measurement of intelligence across different populations. And another interesting phenomenon related to intelligence testing is going to be the Flynn effect. Now, the Flynn effect refers to the observed rise in average IQ scores over time across many countries. This increase has been attributed to various factors such as better nutrition, improved education, and more stimulating environments. Understanding the Flynn effect highlights the importance of continuously updating and adapting intelligence tests to maintain their accuracy and relevancy over time. Now, when discussing variations in IQ scores, it is very important to consider both intragroup and intergroup variability. Intragroup variability refers to the differences in IQ scores within a specific group, while intergroup variability looks at the differences between different groups. So research has consistently shown that IQ scores tend to vary more within groups than between groups. This means that individual differences in intelligence are greater within any given group than the average differences observed between those groups. Now, this is very important to consider because it highlights the diversity of cognitive abilities within any group and cautions us against making broad generalizations about the intelligence of different groups based on average IQ scores. We are going to see that academic achievement and intelligence are often measured differently with specific tests designed to evaluate each area. An achievement test measures what a person has learned or accomplished in a specific area. For example, the AP Psych exam you will be taking is going to assess your knowledge of psychology theories and concepts. An aptitude test evaluates a person's potential to learn or perform well in a particular area. The SATs, for instance, aims to predict your ability to succeed in college by assessing your reasoning and problem-solving skills. These different types of tests provide insights into what individuals have achieved academically and their potential for future learning and success. We are also going to see that people's beliefs about their intelligence can significantly impact academic achievement. A fixed mindset is the belief that intelligence is static and unchangeable from birth. People with a fixed mindset may avoid challenges, give up easily, and feel threatened by the success of others because they believe their abilities are set in stone. A growth mindset is the belief that intelligence can be developed through effort, learning, and persistence. People with a growth mindset are more likely to embrace challenges, persist in the face of setbacks, and see effort as a path to mastery. According to psychologists, this mindset encourages a love of learning and resilience, which is essential for success and achievement. Understanding these mindsets is crucial because adopting a growth mindset can lead to higher motivation and achievement in both academic and personal pursuits, fostering continuous growth and development. Whew. And that does it for our Unit 2 review on cognition. Hopefully after watching, you are more comfortable with the content from this unit. If you feel like you need some more clarification, drop a comment and I'll see what I can do to help you out. And with that out of the way, I am out of here. I will see you all next time. Peace.